It started like any other interview: bright lights, polite laughter, and the calm, composed presence that Jamie Dornan had perfected over the years. Sitting across from a journalist at a London studio, he looked relaxed, confident, even amused as he answered questions about his latest project. The room was warm, filled with the soft hum of equipment, the gentle chatter of producers. For most of the conversation, Jamie was his usual self, witty, grounded, and just the right amount of mysterious. Then, the interviewer smiled and asked the question that changed everything. "So, Jamie, it's been years since 50 Shades of Grey. You and Dakota Johnson shared something the world will never forget. Do you still keep in touch?" For a split second, everything stilled. Jamie's lips parted, as if to answer immediately, but then he hesitated. His hand tightened slightly around the armrest of his chair. The easy confidence he'd carried throughout the interview seemed to falter. He laughed softly, not the charming kind of laugh people expected, but a nervous one, almost defensive. "Ah, Dakota," he murmured, "you always find a way to bring her up, don't you?" The host chuckled, unaware of the tension beginning to rise. "Well, people still talk about you too. You had incredible chemistry, on and off the screen. Fans are still obsessed." Jamie exhaled, his smile fading just a little. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then looked up again, eyes softer now, almost distant. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That was a very unique time." There was a pause, longer than anyone expected. Cameras kept rolling, but the atmosphere had shifted. Jamie's tone wasn't rehearsed anymore. It was raw, almost unguarded. "You know," he continued, his voice lower now, "people think it was all just acting. That kind of connection, the intimacy. But what Dakota and I had, it was built on trust. You can't fake that." The room fell silent. Even the interviewer seemed unsure whether to press further or let him speak. Jamie blinked a few times, his gaze drifting off to nowhere. She's different," he finally said. "Dakota has this way of understanding you without needing words. I've worked with so many people, but she—" His voice trailed off. He swallowed hard, trying to regain composure, but the emotion in his eyes betrayed him. "Sorry," he said softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't expect to feel that." It was the first time in years the world had seen Jamie Dornan lose control, not in anger, but in emotion. The host tried to lighten the mood, but the energy in the room had changed completely. Jamie wasn't acting now, he was remembering. "I think," he said after a long pause, "we went through something together that no one else really understands. When you spend that much time pretending to love someone, and doing it so intensely, there's a part of you that starts to wonder what's real and what's not." The interviewer, sensing the depth of the moment, asked gently, "And for you, was it real?" Jamie looked up, caught off guard. For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. His eyes glistened under the lights, and when he finally spoke, his voice cracked slightly. "It was something real, yes. Maybe not love, but something that doesn't go away." The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. The journalist didn't dare interrupt. It was clear Jamie hadn't meant to say so much, but once he started, he couldn't stop. Years of restraint seemed to melt away in that one conversation. He tried to laugh it off again, shaking his head. "It's funny, isn't it? People think actors can just walk away from those stories. But sometimes, those stories stay with you. Dakota, she'll always be a part of that chapter of my life." For the first time in the entire interview, Jamie looked vulnerable, the polished image of the Hollywood star slipping to reveal the man underneath. His voice softened one last time. "Some people leave marks that don't fade. She's one of them." The producer signaled to wrap up, and the host quickly thanked him for his time. Jamie smiled politely, but his mind was elsewhere. As the cameras stopped, he sat still for a moment, eyes unfocused, before letting out a long, unsteady breath. No one in the room said a word. They all knew they had just witnessed something rare. A man known for his composure, suddenly stripped of it. By the next morning, clips from the interview were everywhere. Headlines screamed, Jamie Dornan gets emotional over Dakota Johnson. She's different. Fans couldn't believe it. The world had seen the calm, measured Jamie Dornan for years, but this was something else. He hadn't just talked about Dakota. He had felt her presence again, and for the first time, the world saw just how much she still lingered in his heart. The moment the interview aired, it took less than an hour for the internet to erupt. Clips of Jamie Dornan's trembling voice and misty eyes were everywhere: TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Fans dissected every second, every breath, every word he'd said about Dakota Johnson. He still loves her, one headline declared. Jamie Dornan finally admits his true feelings, screamed another. But what the world didn't see was what happened after the cameras stopped. When the studio lights dimmed and the crew began packing up, Jamie sat still for a long time. His coffee had gone cold. One of the producers, trying to be kind, asked if he was all right. Jamie smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, just didn't expect that question to hit me like it did." He left the studio quietly, slipping into the gray London afternoon, sunglasses hiding eyes that still carried the weight of what he'd just said. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Jamie watched the clip again. It was strange seeing himself like that, vulnerable, exposed. For years, he'd mastered the art of keeping emotion under control. But something about hearing Dakota's name out loud had cracked open a door he thought was long sealed shut. "It's not about love," he muttered under his breath, as if trying to convince himself. "It's about history." But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. When the interviewer mentioned Dakota, what surfaced wasn't romance, it was memory. He remembered the first day on set, the way she'd looked at him without judgment, the quiet trust that grew between them scene after scene. She'd been fearless, intuitive, and kind. Together, they had built something cinematic, yes, but also profoundly human. "She understood me," he once told a friend, "even when I didn't understand myself." The next morning, Jamie woke to dozens of missed calls. His agent, publicist, even old castmates wanted to talk. "Do you want to clarify the interview?" they asked. "We can say it was taken out of context." But Jamie refused. "No," he said firmly. "I meant what I said." When Dakota saw the clip, she was in Los Angeles, preparing for a new project. A friend showed it to her, expecting laughter or surprise, but instead, Dakota went quiet. She watched the entire thing twice, her expression unreadable. "He looks sad," she said finally, almost whispering. "Jamie doesn't usually let people see that." Within days, tabloids were running with stories of Dakota's response to Jamie's emotional breakdown. Of course, none of them were true. Dakota hadn't said a word publicly. But the speculation only grew. Some claimed she reached out privately. Others said she avoided the topic altogether. No one really knew. Meanwhile, Jamie found himself struggling with the aftermath. In interviews that followed, journalists tried to revisit the moment, asking him if he regretted showing so much emotion. He smiled politely and deflected, but there was a subtle honesty in his voice when he finally answered one persistent question. "No," he said softly. "I don't regret it. I think, for once, I spoke from a place that was real. Maybe too real." That honesty hit differently. Fans saw it not as scandal, but as humanity. A rare glimpse of the man behind the movie star. "He's been holding that in for years," one fan wrote online. "You can tell those feelings never really left." Privately, Jamie later admitted that what had shaken him wasn't love, it was the weight of shared experience. "We went through something the world will never understand," he told a close confidant. When you spend years bearing your soul on camera with someone, you form a bond. And sometimes, that bond doesn't fade, even when it changes shape. Dakota, when asked weeks later about Jamie's emotional interview, smiled gently before replying, "He's always been honest. That's one of the reasons we worked so well together." She paused, then added, "We went through something very intense, and we'll always respect each other for it." It wasn't an admission of romance, but it was enough to stir hearts again. Fans called it closure with chemistry. In truth, both Jamie and Dakota had moved on in their lives. different paths, different loves, different dreams. But their connection had become something timeless, untouchable by gossip or distance. A few months later, at an award ceremony in London, fate put them in the same room once again. Cameras flashed as Dakota entered, her silver dress glimmering under the lights. Moments later, Jamie arrived. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd, a small smile, a knowing nod. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Observers swore they saw something in that look, not longing, not regret, but understanding. Two people who had once shared a moment too deep to ever fully explain. And perhaps that's why Jamie lost control in that interview, not because he still loved her, but because a part of him never stopped remembering what they had built together. As one journalist later wrote, he wasn't emotional because of Dakota Johnson. He was emotional because some connections, no matter how much time passes, remain too honest to hide.